the seminar. So Jessica is going to present today about possibilities of predicting self-cure of infectious diseases with a focus on metritis. So this is part of a USDA trial that we did a few years ago, that most of the data that she's going to present today, but also she'll give, she'll continue to work on that as part of another USDA grant specifically focused on that we have in collaboration with Texas Tech. So the data that she'll present today is part of a previous trial, and luckily Dr. Chabel had collected information using activity monitors, automated activity monitors. So she'll talk about that today. But just as a brief introduction for Jessica, she came to the US in 2019, first to work with Dr. Santos, and she spent, I think, 6 months, close to 6 months working with him. And then she was looking for opportunities to come back. And then that's how she got in contact with me. And we had these projects coming up. So I was lucky enough to have her join us because she has been big help, great help in another project that my other grad student was doing. She was his first hand on that trial, and now she is leading this other project, which is, I said, is in collaboration with Texas Tech. So she's been going to the farm daily, no breaks for a long time now. Now she was going to the dairy unit, examining cows for diagnosis of metritis and assigning them to treatment. Now she's going to North Florida Holsteins, which is a bigger challenge still. So, and now when, she's planning on finishing data collection before, by the summer, and to start her master's in the fall. So we're glad to have her with us and continuing into her master's program. With that, Jessica, feel free to go ahead. Thank you.
All right. And thanks, Clips, for the introduction. And thanks for the opportunity to share some of this information through the seminar today. All right, so for the next half an hour, I will be talking about the topic that Clips just mentioned, particularly talking about metritis, and let's start it. So metritis is an infectious disease that affects the 3 layers of the uterus in the early days postpartum. And what we use to define what is metritis, as you can see in this picture, is this 1 to 5 vaginal discharge score, where the 5 is what we consider as being metritis, that is a watery, fetid, red-brownish discharge. And from 1 to 4 is what we consider as not being metritis. So metritis is very important because it's a high prevalent disease affecting around 20% of the cows, and depending on the farm, this range can go from 10 to 50%. Also is associated with some negative effects, such as decreasing milk yield, decreasing fertility. It also increases culling and death. Some cows can actually die from metritis, and all of that leads us to economic loss. And in addition, metritis is also a very painful disease affecting the animal welfare. So when we think about the treatment for metritis, the standard procedure is the use of antibiotics. And so that's why I brought this study from 2004, where they wanted to evaluate the effect of treatment of metritis on cure 14 days after diagnosis. So they used XNL, that is a ceftiofur with a short half-life. So it has to be given to the animal once a day during 5 days. So here in the study, they divided the animals in 3 different treatments, and we have XNL in 2 different doses, and also a control group, which is the cows that were not treated for metritis. They did not use antibiotics to treat these cows. And as you can see, the XNL using the dose 2.2 milligrams per kilo was significant and effective to treat cows with metritis, having a 77% of cure. And also, still talking about the treatment, this study from almost 10 years later, they also wanted to evaluate the effect of treatment metritis using antibiotics, but now they use Exceed. That is also a ceftiofur, but with a different formulation, which is long and is a long-acting formulation. It has to be given to the animal on the day of diagnosis and 72 hours later in the base of the year. And as you can see, again, treating with antibiotics was effective to cure metritis, and almost 75% of the cows had cured. And they also had a control group. They were the cows that remained untreated. And again, still talking about treatment of metritis with antibiotics. The study from the last year, they also used Exceed, but now they evaluated cure 12 days after diagnosis. And again, they found similar results as the previous study, where almost 78% of the cows had cured. So here I brought the 3 studies that I just showed you, and what I want to emphasize here is not the drug that they use, is not the dose, but actually that they are large experiments. In all of them, we had control cows. They are the cows that did not receive treatment for metritis. They did not receive antibiotics. And as you can see, the range of cure goes from 55% to 62%, which means that more than half of the cows are able to cure, to have self-cure from metritis. And if you look for the cows that were treated with antibiotics, we are still not having 100% of cure. So this difference, it is significant, but it may justify we not use antibiotics to treat metritis. And when I say that the cows were able to have self-cure from metritis, I'm not saying that they did not pay for the price when we talk about milk production or reproductive performance, and also that they did well in animal welfare. But the point is that cows are able to resolve and cure from metritis without using antibiotics. So the treatment decision has to take in consideration not just the self-cure, but also the economic impact, the animal welfare, and antibiotic resistance. As we know, it is not just a problem in the dairy community, but actually a global concern. For example, ceftiofur is one antibiotic labeled to treat metritis, but it's also used in human health. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when taking the treatment decision. And it brings us to the question, can we manage uterine infections without using antibiotics? And when we ask why some cows develop metritis and others don't, there's of course some risk factors related around the day of calving, such as dystocia and retained placenta being the big ones. We also have vaginal laceration, twins, stillbirth, and others. But the point is that in fact, the roots of metritis go back some distance before that. And some of the things that people are looking now is the difference between behavior in cows that would develop metritis and cows that did not develop metritis. So in this study, they wanted to associate the difference between dry matter intake between the cows that developed metritis and did not develop metritis during the whole peripartum. And as you can see here, the cows that would develop metritis, they were already eating less even before they had metritis, which underlines the point that maybe there's some metabolic changes, immune function changes, and behavior changes happening even before they develop metritis. And of course, it's almost impossible to measure individual feed intake in a commercial farm, but something that we can do is to use automated devices to monitor rumination. And the rumination over time changes based on dry matter intake. So that's what they did in the study. They used active rumination through the automated devices to diagnose metritis. And they have a lot of different, sensitivity for just associating just with metritis or metritis with other disorders. And something that is very interesting here is that they had 78% of sensitivity when metritis were combined by another disorder. And here, still following this idea of associating the behavior with metritis, in this study from our group, not published yet, they associated the behavior with cure of metritis following antibiotic treatment. So the first thing here is that the automated devices looks to be able to show significant difference between the population that did cure and the population that did not cure. But to predict what is going to happen with the cow, what looks like being the most important thing is if we look for 1 day before the diagnosis. That looks like to be the point where the differences are biggest. So that means that and if you look to 5 days before that and 10 days before the diagnosis, these differences are not that big. So that means that maybe if we use these differences that are happening before diagnosis, we are able to predict what is going to happen with the cow that are going to cure and the cow that are not going to be cured from metritis. And keeping this in mind of the use of automated devices and associating the behavior, we have our hypothesis. That is the rumination and activity data recorded pre-diagnosis of metritis through the automated monitor devices may be used for the prediction of cows that will have self-cure 12 days after diagnosis. And our objective were to explore the development of an index based on cow-related factors and behavior changes to predict cows that will have self-cure from metritis. So our theory methods, it's important to say that this is a subset of cows used in a large experiment. And this experiment was conducted in a dairy farm located in north of Central Florida. And from May 2016 to June 2017, and 311 pregnant heifers were fitted with a collar mounted in automated device around 60 days before the expected calving date. And once they were diagnosed with metritis, they were assigned to one of the 3 treatments, which is Selfcare. In this case, they used Exceed, chitosan microparticles, and the control, that is the cows that were not treated at the day of diagnosis. And in addition, contemporaneous heifers fitted with the collars they were not diagnosed with metritis were used for comparison. So the experiment design, around 6 days before calving, the cows were fitted with the collars, and information about temperature and humidity were collected during the whole period of the experiment. And we follow up with these cows until they calved, where the information about dystocia, male, twins, and stillborn were collected. 1 day after calving, information about retained placenta. And from the days 5, 7, and 9, the vaginal discharge was evaluated through this Metricheck device using the classification that I showed you in the beginning of this presentation. And in addition, body conditioner score were collected day -60 and the day of calving, and vaginal laceration was collected day 5. Once the cow was diagnosed with metritis, she was randomly assigned for one of the 3 treatments, and the first day of diagnosis we call as being day 0, and the cows that were in the control group received the first dose at day 0, day 2, and day 4. The cows in the Selfcare group received the first dose at day 0 and day 3, and the control cows did not receive any treatment at the day of diagnosis. Also, rectal temperature were collected at the day of diagnosis, and 12 days after diagnosis, the vaginal discharge was reevaluated to see if the cow did cure or if she did not cure. Now talking about the self-cure and the definition and the group that we used to predict to build our predicting model. So the control cows with vaginal discharge equal or less than 4, we define as being, we consider as having self-cure 12 days after enrollment. And the cows that had vaginal discharge equal to 5, we consider as having non-cure. And now the cows that received escape therapy during this period, we also consider as not having self-cure. And now talking a little bit about the collars. So this automated device is mounted in a collar and fitted in the left side of the neck of the cow. And it works through an accelerometer based on the movement of the head of the cow. And this information is read by an antenna, and this antenna sends this information to a software in a computer. And here we have an example of how the software shows us the dynamic graphic of rumination and activity. Our statistical analysis. So all the statistical analysis were conducted in SAS. Continuous data were analyzed by ANOVA with repeated measurements using mixed procedure. The cows were nested within treatment. Prepartum and postpartum behavior were analyzed separately, and the day of calving was included in the postpartum analysis. In addition, the predictive model were generated by logistic regression using logistic procedure, and the explanatory variables were removed by backward elimination until only the variables with p less or equal 0.2 were remaining in the model. And so here we have a descriptive data of our cows that have metritis and the cows that did not have metritis. And as you can see, the cows with metritis had more dystocia, retained placenta, stillbirth, and vaginal laceration, which is not surprising. And here are results. So the effect of treatment of cows with metritis on behavior. So basically, we are comparing the behavior between the different treatments and in rumination and activity. And what is very interesting here is how the chitosan group, that is the line in orange, how the chitosan decreased rumination from the day of diagnosis to 3 days later. And it also decreased activity 2 days after diagnosis, which really shows that the chitosan has an acute negative effect on the cow. And if we look for milk yield and survival by 90 days in milk in the herd, also, if we look for the chitosan group, we see a significant difference comparing to the other treatments when you look for removal by 90 days in milk. Here we have a descriptive data of our control group. They are the cows that were not treated. So we have 17 cows that failed to cure and 22 cows that did have self-cure. And one thing here, if you look for average of these in milking roads, male, calving problems, the numbers did not have that much difference between each other, but one point here is that the cows that failed to cure, almost 71% of them were open after 150 days in milk. And the cows that did cure, 40% of them are open. And if we look for milk yield, the cows that failed to cure, 35% of them had bottom quartile milk yield by 150 days. And the cows that did self-cure, 23%. So here the association between self-cure from cows that have metritis and behavior. So in blue we have the cows that did have self-cure, in orange the cows that did not cure, and there's no statistical differences in reality because we have a small sample size. What I want to point out here is that what we are trying to use is the differences on the days before diagnosis. That even though there's no significant difference, there seems to be to have a very clear separation between the two groups, the group that did cure and the group that did not cure. And here we have the variables retained in the Phyto model to predict self-cure. So we have days in milk at enrollment, we have no vaginal laceration, rumination, and activity on the day of diagnosis. So the cows that had a higher days in milk at diagnosis are less likely to have self-cure. Cows with no vaginal laceration have greater chances to have self-cure. And greater rumination the day of diagnosis increases the risk of the cow to have self-cure, and greater activity on the day of diagnosis also increases the risk of the cow have self-cure, but only until a certain point. And here we have our model, our preliminary results. So the area under the curve was 0.9. Our sensitivity was 93.3% and specificity 81.8%. So in my opinion, it is a good test to identify which cows are going to have self-cure and which cows don't. But more important than that is if we look for the positive predictive value, it is quite high, which means that if we say that a cow is going to have self-cure, it means that we have a high confidence that the cow is truly going to have self-cure, and she doesn't need to be treated. And if you look for the negative predictive value, if we say that a cow is not going to have self-cure, again we have a high confidence, and that means that this cow, we have to pay more attention. This cow, we have to treat her more aggressively, and even associated with some supportive therapy, because the chances of she did not have cure are quite high. And with that, in summary, the treatment with chitosan microparticles reduced rumination in the first 70 hours after treatment. Oliveira 2020 demonstrated the chitosan increased the risk of choline. And our data suggests that in first lactation cows, the chitosan actually results in a systemic reaction that is detrimental for the cow. And we developed an excellent predictive model for the identification of cows having metritis that more likely will achieve self-cure by 12 days after diagnosis. And in conclusion, so the use of automated devices over the last years increased. It can be attributed to the herd size, to the limitations of personal examinations, also because it's a non-invasive technology and is useful just not to monitor metritis, but cow health in general, and also reproductive management. And the applicability of the predictive model, once there's no predictive model to identify cows that have risk to have self-cure, and it can help to take early decisions and help to minimize the amount of antibiotics used in the field. And for last, the welfare of the cows with metritis, the increase of antibiotic resistance, and the economic impact of the cows with metritis has to be taken in consideration when making the treatment decisions. With that, I would like to thank you, my advisor, Clips Galvão, Ricardo, that is also advising me during this period, Eduardo, Anderson, and everybody from my team. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Open for questions. Looks like we have one here in the chat from Ana Beatriz. Great presentation, Jessica. What would you expect if you had evaluated multiple cows?
So that's why we are doing this project right now. So we are also enrolling multiparous, but what I believe that we're not going to have differences, but in between multiparous and primiparous. But once we have the data, we can analyze that and see if there's some interaction between parity. And I hope I can answer this question better for you in the future. But I believe we won't have differences.
Jessica, can you show what the model was? I just don't remember. The one that had the high accuracy. Yeah, what was in the model?
Oh, sorry. The variables written in the model?
Yes.
So we have here.
Okay. Okay. So the activity and the rumination you have every day, correct?
Yes.
So every day this would generate a prediction whether the cow is a high probability of self-cure. All you have to do is, did she have laceration?
Yes.
That's basically the only observation you would need, correct? From this.
Yes.
Everything else, you know how many days in milk, every day increases 1. And then the activity is generated by the collars.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too complicated.
Yeah. It's something
That's
that
actually very good. Yeah.
it's something that we can actually be easily collect from the farm. Use the same information that the farm already has, just adding the colors.
And everything else you fit in the model did not hold to the 20% probability. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Sorry, can I ask again?
Thanks for the question, Jose. And other questions?
Jessica, I have a question.
Okay.
Looking at the wrong screen here. So just using your study as a model, right? The main idea is to find cows that are likely to go through self-cure, so you wouldn't treat them, right?
Yeah.
So with this data you're analyzing, you're assuming that a cow that self-cures and a cow that cures after being treated are the same. Is that a fair conclusion?
So we don't have economic analysis, but what I have seen is that actually the cows that were treated with antibiotics and the cows that were not treated, the cows treated with antibiotics, they were, let's say, they did not give us the economic. We spend less money with that cow. Let's say the cow that we treated for metritis by the end, was cheaper than the cow that we not treated. It costs less for the farm. Is that a question?
Right. No, I understand that. My question is, if we decide not to treat some cows because we can predict that they show the same clinical resolution without the treatment, do we know if they're the same as a cow that cures after treatment in all other regards?
Oh, yeah. So
like a cow that would have cured anyways, if I had treated her regardless, would she have better milk production because she cured quicker due to the therapy? Is she the same cured cow after or not after treatment? That's my point. And I don't think we know that. Just wanted to have your insights on it.
yes.
But Eduardo has those data, yeah? Clips has those data.
Yeah, I think we would have difference in reproductive performance, conception rate, pregnancy loss,
but in that case, they analyze the whole thing, yeah? What Rafael is saying is, like you showed 3 experiments, John Chenault and Charlene McLaughlin and then Eduardo's. So at least from Eduardo's, Clips has the data from the cows that cure within day 12 of the diagnosis, correct, Clips? And then he has the cure from the cows that receive Ceftiofur. So he can compare those, the 80% Ceftiofur versus the whatever 60% no antimicrobial therapy, and see whether those cows were the same or not.
So Kyle started looking at that, looking at cured treated with antibiotics, not cured treated with antibiotics, cured untreated, not cured untreated. And it seems that the cure that are not cured with antibiotics is better than not. Well, let me see that again. Yeah. Right, the cured by self-cure. No. What the hell is that again?
Hey, Cliffs. So
I'm getting all the form groups.
So
jump in, guys.
So we compared the animals that cured and didn't cure, and then we stratified them based on the treatment. So the treatment, based on the number of animals that we have, that was low, right? So the animals that benefited the treatment of antibiotic are the ones that don't cure. So the treatment was associated with some recovery in fertility for the animals that do not achieve clinical cure.
Right.
Even that's the other thing that Jessica is going to do with her data set, though. It's to try to use the same information that she's using to predict cure to actually predict for the cows that have metritis and are not treated, whether they will succeed in milk production and reproduction. So So another layer to this that cannot really be done with this data set because it's small is to actually predict the day before diagnosis whether or not the cow will have reproductive success and milk production success, because then you add another layer of determination of what to do with that cow, not just cure by day 12.
Right, because it seems that what we call cure or not cure does not fully represent the future outcomes for the cow in regards to milk production and reproduction. If you just compare cured and not cured, cured definitely is better. But then if you stratify based on having received antibiotic or not, the antibiotic still has a benefit, if that makes sense. So I have a question here on the chat from Brittany. Can you further speculate on what is actually causing the intrauterine therapy to to have that acute detrimental impact on the cow's activity and rumination? Good question, Brittany.
Well,
it was not the focus of Jessica's study, but maybe she can speculate.
So yeah, chitosan, I think it has some studies showing that chitosan can be used as antimicrobial therapy, but I believe that when you do the solution and you infuse inside the uterus, it actually causes more reaction, right? Because and then that's what caused the cows that were treated with chitosan had lower rumination activity. Actually, it was worse than the cows that did not receive any treatment, right? But what could be causing this reaction? I cannot really. I can give a look at it and answer it for you later.
Good question. Let me see. Okay. Any other questions? Well, seems that nobody else has questions. So if not, thanks again, Jessica, for the great presentation. We look forward to seeing more on this as you complete the enrollment of the other 100 cows that that you're aiming for. So thanks everybody. So see you next time.
Thank you.
Do you have any announcements, Fiona, or can we?
No, we just have one more seminar for the semester, and that's next week. So I'll send out an announcement for that today.
Perfect. Bye. Right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.